Okay, so in the second part of this process, or second stage of this process, which is to locate the relevant literature, it's very tricky. There is not like a simple way to find it. Like sometimes your supervisor gives you some papers, maybe you already know them, like the basic papers about your topic, and then you start from there. That's one way to do it. But ideally, in a thesis, the examiner would like to see that you start from a broad point of view, that you are not too narrow at the beginning, even though that maybe that might be true, that maybe you started with a paper that you like and that's your initial point. It is better to start broad, to start with a big search of literature, with an open mind in terms of the literature. I think this is a good suggestion for a thesis. It's not the only way to do it, of course, but I think it's a way to play it safe, because it shows that you start from a broad perspective, and that the whole process of the literature review is very conscious process. But let's assume that, and let's follow this. Of course, everything that I say, even in the other videos, is not like a law of nature, but I think it helps you. It's like, I think it's useful for a thesis. And remember, all of this is for a thesis. Like, it's not about winning a Nobel Prize. I have no idea how to do it. So the first step, I believe, in this process, which consists also, I believe, in 3 minor processes, is first to set keywords. And what are keywords? Where keywords should be concepts or words that form a concept and that describe your research or your research topic or your research problem, more like your research problem, sorry. So use words that can define or can simplify or describe your research problem. And some suggestions in there is try to use words that other research has used, but this can be tricky because maybe you haven't read anything, so maybe this doesn't apply. Or and also use synonyms, like for example, here we have, if you want to talk about business exit, of course, write business exit, but you can also talk about exit, the best, I don't know how to pronounce that word, divestitures, entrepreneurial exit, small business exit. So similar words that can refer to the same thing. This is a bit tricky because it kind of contradicts a tip that I gave you before, or a rule that I gave you before. Never use different words to refer to the same concept, but that is for the writing. When you write your thesis, don't do this. Don't use synonyms for writing. For writing, no. But for searching, yes. For searching, yes. For searching, you can use it, because that's another thing that's very confusing. When I wrote my PhD thesis, I was very confused because I didn't know if performance measurement was the same as performance evaluation, for example. Maybe it's not exactly the same, but maybe I can abstract the idea and make it work. So it's okay. Play it to play it safe. You can use synonyms when you search. Just be careful. Still, check if the spirit of the concepts are close, and then you can use business exit and entrepreneurial exit. That's the same thing if it works for you. So be conscious, but it's okay for search, but not for writing. For writing, never use synonyms, never, because it's very confusing. Imagine if it is confusing when you read 2 different papers, that one says small business exit and the other one says entrepreneurial exit. They're 2 separate journals, 2 separate people. It's very confusing to read them. Imagine how confusing it is if it is the same paper. It's impossible to read it because it doesn't fit in there. So when you write, no synonyms, but when you search, yes. So then you have some ways to search for articles. Once that you have your keywords, then you have some choices. And my suggestion is that, again, this is a suggestion. You can start however you want. But my suggestion that I think will facilitate your life is that you start with electronic search. So you start with a search engine and not manually. Because when you do manual search, you specifically look for specific papers. It's like you can do it online, you can do it electronically, but is that you go for specific papers, like you already know which papers, or your supervisor already gives you some. It's possible that you do this because they suggest, but so if they ask, you do it. If your supervisor asks, you do it. But my suggestion is that you don't skip the electronic search. So use the search engine as the first step. Also, you will have to do manual search later, even with the system that I propose. It's part of the Prisma, but I will tell, it usually comes later. So my suggestion is start with electronic search. So how to do the electronic search? So you can use Google Scholar. For me, that's my favorite way to do the search. Other people use the University Library Search tool. That's also very useful. Other people use databases like Scopus, or EBSCO. There are different databases that you can use. So feel free to use one of these. I like Google Scholar. All of them has advantages and disadvantages. Let me go really quickly to that. In Google Scholar, you find everything, but the problem with Google Scholar is that you also find things that are from very bad quality. So sometimes you end up with a lot of trash, but which I think is very sad that there is very bad research, but it exists. But well, that's another thing that we won't talk about, how to differentiate about the quality of publications and articles and books. But anyway, Google Scholar, I like it because I don't know, I like it. It gives you, it's easy to use, and I like it because of that. But you can use the University Library Search tool. I think it's very useful, but I found it a bit confusing to use. So I think in here you have more quality, but it's a bit harder to use. That's my interpretation. And you can also use the Scopus. That's one example, but you can use other databases. And the advantage is that the search provides better answers, like better results. Like they can give you more. You have more options to search. The disadvantage is that in Scopus is only what is in Scopus, and sometimes not everything is in Scopus. So it's a very tricky way, a very tricky, very difficult answer if I have to answer which is the best. For me, is Google Scholar, but other people prefer others. So maybe you can try all of them and then you will find your favorite one. So when you do your search, use your keywords. That's why the keywords were important. So here are some tips for searching. Maybe you know that before, but maybe you don't. So it's useful, this information. So you can use what we call truncation. That means that you cut the word and you add a star at the end of you cut it, because with that symbol, with the star, you indicate that you are interested on finance, anything that is with finance, after whatever is after the C. So if you're interested on financial, then you can have finance and the star. Okay, so that's one trick to look for something. Another very useful thing, and we'll do an exercise about it later, is that when you narrow your topic, so for example, digitalization in accounting in public sector, you can use something like this, what we call the Boolean operator. Like you can have and, or and note, right? So if you are interested on family firms and generation, on papers that talk about family firms, but also talk about generation, like in here, then use it like this. Here it looks like these things, like the arrows, but you can use also the how do you call these things? I'll come back to that later. You can use this sign in the like what you have in here. You can use that when you search. Okay, so you can use these arrows or this sign as well, and you can put your concept. Here we use the star because we want family firm or firms. Okay, so also with the S. So those are the tricks that are useful. So you will use family firm, star, and that's important. the generation, the other concept. And then we also have the star because we care about generation and generations. So that, I think it's very useful to use the and, because if you use the or, you capture all the papers that talk about family firm and generations, all of them. That's a lot. It's 2 million articles. That's impossible to work with. And if you do and note, that means that you want to review papers that talk about family firms without generations. So I think the most useful is and. So let's go back to the example of digitalization in public sector accounting. So you can maybe get digitalization, then you can have it's quotation, that quotes this thing. I think that's the name. I don't know why I didn't search for it before doing the video. So on quotes, the digitalization, then you write and, then again with the quotes, accounting, management accounting, maybe if you are more narrow, and then again and then with the quotes, public sector, right? You can even have something else if you want to have. And then let's see how many articles you end up with. Maybe you end up with too many or not that many. That we're going to do an exercise about it, but these are useful tips. And then if you go into Scopus, in Scopus, you have a lot of potential because the search tool has a lot of things that you can fix. That there are a lot of settings in there. So you can decide about different things like what type of data. I think this also works with the university search tool, and I think Google Scholar doesn't have that many settings, but you can search if you can have open access or if you have to pay. But luckily, if you're in the university, you don't have to pay for anything. You can also set like a time frame. That's very important that you set a time frame. We're going to talk about that later. Like you ideally you do a review from, I don't know, 20 years, depending on your topic, but you don't want to go that back, like maybe just like the very first important articles, and then just take the last 20, 15 years, depending on the topic. We're going to talk about that later. You can talk about subject, type of research, all of these things. So these are useful things for searching for the literature. My suggestion is that you search for it like just for fun and spend some time, search for it, try different combinations, let's see what you get. And then after that, the next thing that we need to do is like a screening. Like we need to kind of filter what is useful and what is not. So I've finished the video in here with this idea of the search engines and all of this, and then we continue with assessing the quality of the literature.